Welcome back into Snow The Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. And as we promised last week, we would be featuring an interview with Alex Lyon, the both Phantoms and Flyers goaltender, as he gets ready to enter yet another season, hopefully with the NHL club. Coming off a 94 save performance in the AHL playoffs and plenty of other things, Anthony sat down with him in Voorhees, and they covered a ton of stuff, including him potentially going back to finish his degree, Game of Thrones, among many other things. So give the interview a listen, and after that, we'll react and cover a few other breaking things in Flyers land. Hope you enjoy.
And we'd like to welcome here to the Snow the Goalie podcast, well, one of the Flyers goalies. I mean, it's a great affiliation there. We have a Flyers goalie on Snow the Goalie. Joining me today is Flyers goalie Alex Lyon. Alex, thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. Excited to come on today.
That's awesome. So, the first thing I've got to ask you is, I mean, you've had a few months off. What's your summer been like? What have you been doing this summer?
It's been a short summer. We after the run in the playoffs last year, and I've just been here in Philly, training and trying to relax a little bit and enjoy the nice weather.
So you've stayed in town. You didn't go back home or anything like that. Or I'm sure you went back home for a visit or something, right? But
yeah, I went back home for a wedding in July.
Okay.
But other than that, I'm a homebody, so I like to be in one place. So I've just been here in Philly and enjoying the city and bounce around the East Coast a little bit. So it's been fun.
Cool. Training camp's coming up in a couple of weeks. How is it going to be different for you this year as compared to previous years? I mean, obviously you came in the first time as an undrafted free agent. Nobody had ever heard of you. Nobody knew who you were. Then you had a nice season with the Phantoms, and so like the second year was kind of like, okay, people know who I am a little bit. Now I just got to try and make a name for myself. And now you've got 11 games of NHL experience under your belt. How is this going to be different this time around?
Yeah, I think the last two times I've taken a good approach, and that's just go in. Work as hard as I can, do the best that I can, and just try and enjoy the experience. I think when you're having fun, a lot, your play gets a lot better, and just not put too much pressure on it, not think about it too much. I think that's the key to life.
Ron said having 5 goalies is better than having 3 goalies, right? And obviously you don't want to have injuries and the like. But with 5 guys here, and most of you, I think, relatively healthy coming into camp, is competition healthy for you guys? Is that a good thing?
Oh yeah, I think it's really healthy for us to push each other, and even in these skates out here, we got a couple of guys and here in the summer right now, so we're competitive. And at the same time, everybody's pulling the rope in the same direction. We all want the Flyers and the Phantoms to be the best teams possible, and so we try to support each other as well. I think that's important, and the way you get better is just by being really relaxed, especially as a goalie. I think that's important. So it's just you got to have that healthy balance of competitivity as well as it's all in good fun as well.
New contract says, I think, a lot about the team's confidence in you. I mean, give you 2 years. That second year is, if I'm correct, is just NHL. Does that speak a lot to you? Does that give you some more confidence coming into this season, knowing that the team feels so strongly about you in that way?
For sure. I think the compensation is as much of a benchmark as anything for any athlete or any profession, really. But at the same time, I feel like I've had a good recipe to get there, and I don't want to throw that away either. Really the only thing, for me is just keep focusing on the things I can control, and you just keep sticking to the grindstone, and you want to enjoy it. And obviously I'm so appreciative to the Flyers for everything that they've done for me the last 2 years, but I'm also going to just keep doing my own thing and let the chips fall where they may.
Everything they've done for you, everything you've done for them. I mean, not everybody has a 94 save performance, right? Can you take us back to that? I mean, not a lot of people in Philadelphia really had a chance to talk to you after that. I mean,
sure.
Obviously up in the Lehigh Valley, but 94 saves in one game. I mean, 5 overtimes. We've only seen it once before. Well, twice. Once with the Phantoms when they were up in Glens Falls, but the Flyers did it in 2000. First of all, what's it like to play in a game that long? And then secondly, to make 94 saves out of 95 shots?
I mean, it obviously exhausting. I mean, mentally exhausting really more than anything. But it's also fun and funny and light, and in the moment, once you hit a certain point in the game, you start to appreciate the moment that you're in, and I think that helped us really a lot. We were keeping it light in the locker room in between periods, and it was just something that everybody, I think, kind of we were marveling at it just as much as anybody else. So it's an indescribable experience. I hope that I don't have to do that again, but we got the win, and that's really important too. It made things a lot better.
You've had a real opportunity to work closely with Kim Delabaugh as goalie coach. Your first stint up with the Flyers last year was a little bit more uneven. Then you went back down, and when you came back is when we really got to see a different goalie, a change. How much was he involved in making that difference for you there from what we saw those first 2 or 3 games to what we saw the rest of the season?
Sure. And I'd actually, put Brady Robinson in that category as well.
Okay.
He's the Phantoms goalie coach, right. And they've worked together closely for a long time, so they have really good continuity. And I just, I added a lot of things to my game last summer that I found that it was difficult to maintain. So I had a tough, a little bit in the first half there in November specifically, but coming up here and working with Kim every day and just kind of, putting the pieces together and finding those cornerstones of my game. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about confidence. It's just who believes that they're going to do the best. And so it instilled a lot of confidence back into my game. And also just a great learning experience, I think. You just see everybody go through ups and downs with anything. So it was good to know, if I'm sure there's going to be another bad stretch in my career. It's just the fact of it's just the reality of it. So it was good to know what kind of things I can do to pull myself out of it and really solidify those cornerstones in my game.
We got to talk about the new mask.
Sure.
All right, 6th Sense.
Yeah.
So to take me through the process of putting that together, like what made you say, all right, I'm going to put the 6th Sense and Bruce Willis on my mask.
Yeah, well, so I can't take credit for it. Dave Gunderson,
right,
who's now I think pretty famous, he's the mastermind behind all of it, and I'm low maintenance, so and whatever he wants is basically what I'm down for. But he he does a great job, and we started the horror movie thing last year, and I think that he had pegged the 6th Sense right when we started the horror movie theme, just because it's based in Philly,
right?
Which is pretty cool. So it's a tribute a little bit to Philly and obviously the horror movie thing. But yeah, he obviously does a great job, and he does so many guys around the league, and I think that once you kind of let him express himself creatively, that's when you're going to get the best product, and he always hooks me up.
That's awesome. Now, are you a horror movie fan, a suspense movie fan? Is that kind of how this came to be?
Yeah, I am. I'm actually a big Stephen King novel fan.
So am I. That's great.
Yeah, my mom always read them growing up when I was growing up, and I kind of got into them too. So I think that's kind of where it sparked, and especially the It theme with the movie coming out last year. And now it's just kind of evolving into, I guess the thing that I do for my mask. So that's fine. And I think that Dave enjoys it too and coming up with ideas. So, like I said, I'm pretty low maintenance when it comes to my gear. So it's great for me.
So if I had to say to you, I'm going to put you on the spot. If I had to ask you for a top 5 list, if I'm going to binge watch some good horror suspense films over the next couple of weeks, do you have any?
No.
None?
Well,
aside from It and The 6th Sense.
I wouldn't peg horror movies as my favorite movie genre.
Okay.
I guess I'm just a fan of good movies.
Okay.
So I heard there's some good ones coming out, though. I'm pretty excited. The Nun. I don't know if you've seen trailers for that, but I'm excited. I'm excited for that one to come out. And obviously, It was a pretty big deal last year.
So we need to see part 2, which is not until 2020, I think, right?
I'm not sure. The only thing on my radar right now is Game of Thrones, to be honest with you.
You're a big Game of Thrones fan,
huge Game of Thrones guy. So they just came out with the trailer yesterday.
Yes, so. I saw it. How do you think it's going to wrap up? What's your prediction? There's so many fan predictions out there. You don't have any? No?
I mean, I've read all the fan theories, and I just want to enjoy it for whatever they give us because it's going to be unbelievable. So.
Yeah, it was a pretty good finish to last season.
Oh, amazing!
And now we've been sitting around for 18 months waiting for this to.
They're playing us like fools.
That's great. Have you binge watched anything yourself recently, like this summer? Netflixed anything or?
Yeah, I'm a big Netflix guy. I like The Last Chance U that's came out.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I guess I don't really have a specific taste for anything. I like the HBO series. I think that they do a really good job.
Yeah.
I think that if I had to pick a genre, I'm a big sci-fi guy, and I just love the animation, the cinematography. I think it's just so cool, like what they can do with the stuff on screen now. So impressive. I mean, especially the Game of Thrones stuff. They spend so much money and they do such a good job. So I really appreciate
Being
that.
a sci-fi guy, did you check out Lost in Space?
No, I have. I watched one episode. I haven't gotten into it yet, though.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's well worth it.
Okay.
I recommend it highly. We watched the whole thing, so it's really good. So going back now, I remember last year you were 6 credits shy of graduating from Yale. You still have to do that senior thesis on global nuclear war. Is that correct?
Well, that's an option. Yeah, my major is political science,
Okay.
so the options are endless for me.
Okay.
That was kind of my interest and maybe what I targeted a little bit more in my class choosing. But yeah, I'm still going on that. I think right now, at least for this year of my life, I feel like I'm at a point where I need to put all my eggs in one basket. Sure. So I have admittedly left the schooling off the table a little bit in the last 12 months. But it's not going to deter me from getting my degree. And
eventually, right?
That's important, I think, just as for the honor of it and that kind of accomplishment. So I'm going to get it, but I think right now I just have an opportunity that would be foolish to waste. So that's where I'm at.
Sure, absolutely. And now, just one more note on political science. I guess this will kind of be my final question. So it's not just an interest in nuclear weapons, right? I mean, it's obviously an interest in politics in general. Is that something that maybe once you've thought about, once this whole hockey career is over, 15 years from now, down the road, when you get to turn 40 years old, that maybe something you want to kind of venture into, or is the political climate too crazy for you to say, yeah, we'll just stay away from that?
No, I have a really, really deep interest in politics, and I think as I get older, I'm sure, like for most people, it becomes greater. We'll see. I mean, I guess I don't know necessarily that I'm social enough to be a politician. I think that's got a lot more going than people give it credit for. It's a difficult job. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, political science is also an extremely broad degree. So I think I hope that the opportunities are endless once hockey's over for me.
Great. Alex Lyon, thanks once again for coming on the Snow the Goalie podcast. We really appreciate it, and best of luck to you as training camp opens up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Welcome back to Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast. I'm Russ Joy at Joy on Broad, joined as always by the fantastic, the Alex Lyon interviewing phenom himself, Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. He's not even angry today. He's not talking about the Phillies and the fact that they just blew another game.
Don't get me angry, Russ.
What are they? The Bad News Bears strike once again.
Don't get me mad.
I was 5-4 loss to the Washington Nationals.
I was in a good mood.
And and here we are talking about Alex Lyon, who after that interview, I have to admit, Anthony, I was bummed that I couldn't make it. And the Game of Thrones stuff, when it came up, I was yelling at the recording. I wanted to throw a bunch of questions in. Maybe it's better that I wasn't there for that, but I had a fanboyed out about some GOT.
Well, no, it's funny because I watch Game of Thrones as well, but I'm not as much of a fanboy as you are. And I was surprised by it. I was under the impression that he was like this big horror movie guy, and he said, "No, I'd like horror movies, but that's not like my thing. Like I'm looking forward to Game of Thrones." I was completely unprepared for it, and I was like, "Oh, where do I go with this? I just couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I had so many things. Like I had a list in the recording. I don't know if you probably saw it in the thing there. All the questions that I was going to ask and all the stuff I wanted to talk about. And Game of Thrones was certainly not on the list, and I was completely thrown. I was just like, oh. And my son was there. My younger son, Andrew. I needed somebody to test the microphone since you weren't there. So I had him come in early, and so he was sitting there, and he was like, dude, Dad, you dropped the ball on the Game of Thrones. And I was like, yeah, I know. And he says, you didn't even ask him. When he said he was a sci-fi fan, he says, you didn't even ask him about if he likes Stranger Things. I was like, damn, I missed that one too.
Dad. Jeez,
I missed every. I was so off.
Blew it, Dad.
Thrown off.
I'm never coming back. I'm never coming back with you.
Sucked.
They're never going to let me back in the skate zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay. I was kind of like, when you were saying, how do you think it's going to end? Like, I'm sitting back thinking, hey, who was the character you were saddest to see die? Spoiler alert, Oberyn Martell. Like, that to me is still number one on the list. You raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children, say it. And he pops his head like a pimple. Oh, the Mountain versus the Viper. Kind of like, what I expect the goalie room to look like as we prep for this new season. I don't know who the Mountain's going to be and who the Viper is, but Alex Lyon's going to have to probably crush someone's skull to make this roster, or we're going to have to just wait for the inevitable injury to Michael Neuwirth, right?
No, so I think that when you say make this roster, I think that he's kind of a long shot unless they trade either Elliott or Neuwirth. I think he's a long shot to make the Flyers, but I think that he is solidly one of the four who are going to play either at the NHL or AHL level. They wouldn't have signed him to a 2-year deal with the second year being an NHL-only contract. So that's the key, and that's the interesting thing to his contract is that he does have a 2-way contract this year, so they can shuttle him back and forth from the NHL to the AHL without going through a waiver process because he's on a 2-way deal. But the next season, it's NHL only, which means that if they waive him, he can be claimed and picked up by another team. So usually you don't give somebody an NHL only contract unless you expect them to play in the NHL. And so that tells me a lot. Like the Flyers think enough of him that he can be an NHL backup, which makes me think that he's kind of ahead of Stolarz at this point. But they also re-upped Stolarz, so I don't think that they're ready to give up on Stolarz yet. So I'm kind of confused as to who's going to be where. But I think Alex Lyon is certainly going to be part of the Flyers organization for at least a couple seasons.
I would think that Lyon's probably ahead of Stoley the goalie, at Stoley the goalie on Twitter. I have to think that he's got to be ahead of him on the depth chart at this point, but I'm wondering if the reason that they re-upped Stoley at least is because they thought that maybe there's a team as they go to work to put together a trade package at some point throughout the year. Maybe there's somebody who's still intrigued by the guy's frame and by the promise that really for a long time had a lot of Flyers fans excited about the potential of young Anthony Stolarz. And I don't know. Like Alex Lyon isn't exactly a name that's going to jump off the page at you, right? I think that there's still a little bit more, potentially. Stolarz has never really stayed healthy, but you might think that the ceiling on Stolarz could still be higher than that of Lyon's, but I think Lyon has proven, if nothing else, that he can be a pretty consistent, backup goalkeeper in the NHL, and that's not a bad thing. You need those guys on the roster.
Yeah, you do. I tend to think that Stolarz is signed because they still believe in him a little bit. I don't think that they're looking to trade him because if they were, it would have to be now. Like you wouldn't sign him to trade him during the season because where's he playing? Is he the third goalie? Are they going to carry 3 goalies on the Phantoms?
I'd hope not.
And try and slowly work Carter Hart in. Who knows? Like I don't know what that plan is. And Hextall has said it's better to have 5 goalies than to have 3 goalies. So obviously, to me, that's a knock on Neuwirth, basically saying that we don't trust that he's going to stay healthy for the whole year, so it's better for us to have 5 guys. So I don't know. I think that they believe in Stolarz a little bit more than maybe you do. Not to say that I think that he's a top tier goalie prospect like he once was, drafted in the second round. But I do think that they still feel that his upside is probably NHL backup goalie, and it's probably worth keeping him around for that purpose in case something else happens to somebody else. But he's probably going to need a little bit of time to play to kind of get back because he basically missed the whole year last year with his injury. So yeah, I think Stolarz is still a part of this organization and meaningfully so. More so than the veterans who are currently taking up the two NHL roster spots at this point.
All right, so let's rank 7 goalies. No, 5. Let's go with 5. So you've got Elliott Neuvirth, Stolarz, Lyon, throw in Carter Hart, and even throw in Sandstrom. Where do you think, in terms of value, if you were looking as an opposing GM and you're looking to, acquire a goalie, whether it's for right now or if it's somebody that you think long term is going to be, I think maybe this actually ends up becoming 2 different questions. Like if we're going short term, who's the top of the list? What does that ranking look like? And if we're going long term, like what do you actually think the rankings or value are?
If you're a team who needs a goalie to play right now and play in the NHL, you got to put Neuvirth number 1, even though the injuries. He's probably the most. He's more talented than Brian Elliott. Elliott's more of a competitive goalie. Neuvirth actually has more skill. He's just more frustrating because he can't stay healthy, and I part of me thinks that some of those health issues are a little bit more mental than you would think. So I would probably say if you need a goalie right now, come in, be an NHL goalie, and be able to play and keep your team afloat. It's Michael Neuvirth. But if you're ranking them as far as if you're the GM of a team and you have an opportunity to trade for any of these goalies, what's the order? Carter Hart is number 1. Felix Sandstrom is number 2. I probably still put Neuvirth 3 before Lyon and then Stolarz and then Brian Elliott at the bottom. Not because I think Brian Elliott stinks by any stretch of the imagination, but because he's 35 years old and on the tail end of his career. So I think that you're not looking for him to be like a real long-term answer. So that's how I would probably rank them.
All right. Yeah, seems fair, I guess. I was kind of thinking that you were going to maybe, hype Alex Lyon up a little bit, maybe put him up at number 1 on the list, just because we let off the show with an interview with him, Anthony. That would have made a lot of sense, but no. Okay, let's rank the guy number 4. All right,
if you asked me the
stop being objective, Anthony. We're supposed to go with our hearts here. This is how this is supposed to work, right?
If you asked me that question before the interview played, I maybe would have bumped him up a little bit.
I'll tell you what, though, he actually seemed like a really interesting dude, and
he's awesome. He's great,
and thoughtful. I don't want to alienate an entire organization here or a group of people, but I've known hockey players before, right? And not all hockey players are the brightest bulb in the pack or the most colorful crayon in the box. Sometimes there are a few beans short of a burrito. The lights are on, but no one's home. All these kind of things. They're not the scholars, let's say, of the sports world. Lyon really seemed to have his head on straight, and he seemed like a guy who not only is kind of thinking that he's going to be successful and have a solid NHL career. Or professional hockey career of some sort, but that he kind of has an idea of what he wants to do after hockey. And I think so often as a professional athlete, that's the one thing that a lot of these guys are missing out on is, maybe it's because Lyon realizes that, he's not this elite prospect right now. He might never become a guy that teams look at as being an elite guy. And I think maybe that kind of helps you. It helps ground you and think about what comes next. But think about how many guys across different sports seem to have no plan whatsoever. And for some of them, they catch fire, they become lightning in a bottle or whatever. And pretty soon they fizzle out and there's nothing left. Their pro career's kind of in shambles and they've spent a ton of their money. And pretty soon they're no different than the people who have been, paying exorbitant amounts of money to go see them play, down at the Wells Fargo Center. So, I don't know. I actually kind of liked hearing the way that this guy came across, and I think it kind of speaks to, when we went back and we talked to Hextall about what they look for in drafting flyers and such. I would think that a guy who comes across as well in an interview as Lyon did does nothing to hurt your locker room. If anything, he kind of helps to solidify the continuity that you would expect between leadership and vets and young players. I thought he was really impressive.
Yeah, and I'll tell you for certain that those guys in that locker room really like him. And last year, down the stretch, Lyon ended up playing in 11 games for the Flyers, and which is more than you would think. But he ended up playing in 11 games, and I'll tell you, every time he came into a game, whether it was as a starter or coming in relief, those guys played for him. They liked playing in front of him, and they liked playing in front of him maybe more so than any other goalie. And again, not a knock on any other goalies. Well, maybe one of them, Peter Mrazek, who nobody really liked. But
you're so mean.
But
poor Peter Mrazek. What do you know about Peter Mrazek? Hold on a second. Why do you have a personal vendetta against Peter Mrazek?
Personal vendetta against
that guy. Let me tell you. Let me tell you something about Peter Mrazek. All right.
Yeah, terrible. Anyway,
he was good.
But when Lyon was going into the net, you could tell, the guys wanted to play for him. They wanted, because he was one of them. He's a guy that you like. He's a guy you respect. He's a hard worker. He even said it. He keeps his nose to the grindstone, kind of thing. Blah blah blah. That's guys appreciate that in hockey locker rooms. So they really wanted to play for him. And when you said it was interesting, when you pointed out just how the difference with him as opposed to other athletes or other hockey players, and he just seems so much sharper or smarter than a lot of guys. I tell you, there's a great debate in hockey circles, especially at the not really youth level, but those development years for teens. A real debate as to the best path for hockey players to take, in their careers at that young age. And so many of them end up going to Canadian Junior. And once you go Canadian Junior, that's considered technically professional, even though it's minor hockey and junior hockey, because you are given a small stipend. You have food provided for you and room provided for you through a billet family. So therefore, you lose your NCAA eligibility. So a lot of these kids, they choose that because it seems to be a faster path to the NHL to go play in Canadian Junior. But you do so in lieu of getting an education. Now, a lot of those kids are, being homeschooled or taking college credit classes when they're not playing hockey, but it's a little bit different. They're obviously not pursuing a degree. And then you have the kids who go, maybe they'll go to the USHL, which is minor league hockey in the United States, but allows you to maintain your collegiate eligibility. And then they go and play college hockey. And even if they don't finish, in Alex Lyon's case, he was 6 credits short, they really get a different, they get to follow a course of study for at least a couple years, if not longer, and really get themselves prepared for life after hockey. Because the difference is, junior hockey, I compare it to AAU in the sense that there's a lot of promises that don't get kept in junior hockey, whereas collegiate hockey, it's yeah, you know what? You might be good enough to get drafted. You might be good enough to sign as a free agent and end up on an NHL roster or in the minor leagues or something and make a little bit of money playing this game. But you may not either, so you might as well get an education while you're at it. So there are so many people, on both sides of that argument. And the one thing is that, you look at a guy like Alex Lyon, and he's 6 credits shy of getting a political science degree from Yale. Great college and everything. And all it's going to take is for him to go back and do a senior thesis, which could be done in a summer, right?
Yep.
And once he does that, he's got a Yale degree in political science. This guy can do whatever he wants. And all because he took the path where he started in the USHL and went to college. And if hockey doesn't work out, then guess what? He's got that fallback, which a lot of guys don't have, but he's smart enough to do so. So it's interesting that you point that out, because I think it's really indicative of the person that he is, more so than it is the athlete that he is.
I'm just sitting back thinking about what a life it must be to play the sport you love, play the game you love, and know that regardless of how your pro career turns out, you just have to go back and take 2 classes and graduate with a degree from Yale. If only we could all be so lucky. At least if nothing else, it seems like the guy, kind of realizes what he has in front of him. So that's nice.
Absolutely.
That's always a good thing. It's the thing that always drives me nuts about the NBA, and I don't want to go off on this tangent, but when we talk about why they don't pay college players and everything and how they should and revenue, yada, yada, yada. It's like there are so few guys that actually stay for their degree, and Kyle always likes to kind of like boast about the fact that Nova guys finish their degrees. The one guy that always stood out to me, and
how'd that turn out this year?
Yeah. So the guy that always stands out to me is Vince Carter, who was my favorite basketball player growing up. I know it's like sacrilege to say in the Philadelphia area, like everybody's supposed to love Allen Iverson. I'm going to keep my comments to myself about him being a less athletic and not as good Russell Westbrook. Ooh, the fire. I loved Vince Carter, and the thing that people hated him for in Toronto, actually one of the things that I think really sped up his exit from the Raptors was the fact that I think it was right before Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Vince Carter went back to North Carolina to go walk at graduation, and said that it was something that had always been a goal, I think that he had set out for himself and that he wanted to fulfill to his mom for like all the hard work that she had done. And to me, like, you just don't see that kind of thing anymore. And, it's even something where they go back and years later when they kind of do like the recaps and like the Hardwood Classic stuff, that always seems to kind of come with the game. And I don't know, maybe it's just because it's the exception to the rule, but I think there's something so awesome about a guy going back and finishing the degree. I'm kind of reminded of I think it was Kanye West's album College Dropout. They had like these like weird interludes that would happen between songs, and it was this guy just kind of like reading, and he's talking about how he's poor, and he's like, I'm out here, and he's like, you go to get your bachelor's, then you get your master's, then you get your master's, you go, man. And then you get your doctorate, and you get your second doctorate. And yeah, you might not have anything left in life. You might be cold, but you know what? While you have a house and a family and things that you love, I'm out here in the cold, but you know what keeps me warm at night? That's right, those degrees. I don't know. Alex Lyon. I don't think he's ever going to end up huddled up with his Yale degree, but if he does, I'm sure it'll keep him warm.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Rabbit
love
hole.
when you go off on these random tangents and you start quoting anything, and you're quoting Kanye, which is so outside my element. So
it's a beautiful day, Anthony. This is all good. Let's see. Well, I figured, you know what, I should probably go down one of these rabbit holes to hope that maybe you burned off a little bit of that steam from the Phillies. Should we talk about the Phillies again? No, let's not.
No, but you know what I do want to talk about, Russ? I thought
what's that, Anthony?
It was really funny, and you actually sent it over to me today.
Oh yeah.
But the story from 538, they put out a thing where they were searching for the team that stands out the least. They searched like 50 years of sports history and used some kind of crazy mathematical algorithm and weighted it differently based on different categories, and to determine who the most mediocre team has been in the last 50 years. And they ultimately determined that the Pittsburgh Pirates are the most average team in sports. But
and the Phillies were fifth.
Yeah, Phillies were fifth. That's correct. But that's over a long stretch of time. Basing it on the last 5 years, this is a great quote. For fans seeking long-term mediocrity, the Philadelphia Flyers might be a good option, having finished with between 39 and 42 wins in 4 of their last 5 seasons. And in the one season they didn't, they still racked up points for a league-leading 18 overtime losses, which could easily have turned into ties, a.k.a. the best possible outcome for fans of 500 play, under the NHL's old standing system. According to our algorithm, no team in major pro sports has been more consistently mediocre over the past 5 seasons than the Flyers, although they narrowly edged out the NBA's Washington Wizards, another great pick if you want to watch dependably so-so basketball. So the Flyers were considered the most mediocre professional sports team of the last 5 years. And I think it's spot on. And I don't mean, we watch them every game, right? So we don't
there
necessarily.
Goes the access for Crossing Broad to the Flyers and the organization.
We don't necessarily.
All of the interviews, there they go.
Gone. We don't necessarily.
They're gone. Sources gone. Everything gone. Don't call them mediocre, Anthony.
Yeah, we don't need. We don't
pander.
Yeah,
pander.
Right. But we don't. We don't need to see statistics to know that the Flyers have been mediocre. We just watch the games, and they are they're very Hackstolian. And that's what they are. I mean, really. Like, there are games
Hackstoli the Goalian? Go ahead.
there are games when they look decent. There are games when they look not so good. There are games when they look great. There are games when they look terrible, which is the complete definition of a mediocre team, because it's completely inconsistent from one game to the next. And that's what they've been for the 4 years of Dave Hackstall. And if you go back to the one season that he was referring to with the 18 overtime losses, was a Craig Berube coach team.
The Chief.
And that's it. I mean, look, Dave Hackstall's career record. He's coached 250 games for the Flyers. They've won 124 and lost 126. I mean, a lot of them are overtime losses, so they get points for them. So I guess their points percentage is actually above 500. But if you're just going based on wins and losses, they're a below 500 team with him as the coach, but just barely. And so that's what they are. They are the true definition of mediocre. And I didn't need statistics to tell me that, although I do like the fact that the statistics proved out that they are the most mediocre of any team in professional sports. That's what I found the most interesting.
I'm glad that there was something. I'm glad that I brought a little bit of joy to your day.
Because I like Schadenfreude. Is that what it is?
You know what the funny thing is? So Kevin and I just got done recording a. This kind of gives, I guess, people an idea of timing. So I just finished recording an episode of Crossing Broadcast with Kevin Kincaid. And German was like very prevalent because he brought up, remember the thing about the teacher who did like the Nazi gimmick, and it's been on the site a few times. So we talked about that, and like German came up a few times, and now here we are, totally unrelated show, and the Germans have popped up again. They're everywhere.
But you know what? Isn't Schadenfreude really more used in American English lexicon these days? Even though it's a German root,
I guess so.
A German word. I mean, people know what it means, right?
Schadenfreude,
yeah.
Schaden, like a misfortune. Something sad happens, something that's a bummer. You say Schade, das ist leider so, and then Freude is, coming from, enjoyment. So it's the enjoyment of someone else's misfortune.
Yes.
There we go. This German lesson has been provided to you by Snow The Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast.
Anyway. So, but that's me. I'm really kind of one of those. Not that I take pleasure in other people's pain, but I do certainly take some enjoyment in the failings of professional sports sometimes.
Breaking news! Oh boy.
Uh-oh.
Are you on Twitter right now?
I can be.
Do you see the Sean Couturier news?
No. Go ahead.
There is no news. I just wanted to see if you were on your toes. All right. There we go. All right. Is it time for our favorite segment of the show, or is there anything else that you wanted to get before we mosey on out of here?
No, I thought that's there's nothing. This is the end of August. This is kind of when things really are really slow in hockey, getting ready for the season. It'll really ramp up in a couple weeks, but right now is a lot of dead time. So no, I don't have anything else special to really discuss. Do you want to go to name that flyer?
You're darn right I do, Anthony. You're darn right. It's time for Name That Flyer. I still don't have music for it.
Still don't
It's
have
okay.
music.
Why would I have music? That would no. That's just way too involved. Again, though, if you're listening and you'd like to do things with sound engineering and you want to put together a song for Name That Flyer, is it Name That Flyer or Who's That Flyer? I don't even remember. It's too late. It's after midnight. I'm not sure. Anyway, Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
I figured since we featured an interview with a goalie that this Who's That Flyer should revolve around goalies.
Okay.
So this goalie,
Yeah.
I should let the people get ready. Let them get themselves mentally prepped for this question. This goalie played for the Flyers in parts of 3 seasons.
Okay.
He was a trade. Yeah, he was acquired in a trade. I don't want to tell you what team, but it was an Eastern Conference team where
Okay.
he had spent the entirety of his career to that point. I believe it was 8 years with that club. Yes, it was 8 years. He was traded mid-season to the Flyers. He went on to play 2 more seasons in the orange and black, and then went on to play for not 1 but 2 division rivals.
Ooh.
And he retired 4 years ago.
Wow.
He also finished 10th in Calder Memorial Trophy balloting in 1999.
So I'm going to go with, 99. Now you just threw me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that really threw me. Oh, geez. So wait, so he was a rookie in 99, played 8 years for another team before
So he played
coming to
8
the
years.
Flyers.
So the 8 years is a little bit misleading because the first 2 he only played 3 games in 6 games. So he had gotten some starts for the big team, but
Wow. That's an interesting 3 years with the Flyers.
yep. Or you can count it as 2.5. I guess it depends how you like to do the math. Sort of.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time with this one because the timing of it. Like I remember the goalies who were around at the time that would make sense. You know that we were talking about. The only name I can even think about is it Marty Biron.
It is.
No, really.
Anthony, well done. Yes.
Okay.
He played for 8 parts of 8 seasons with
Buffalo.
the Buffalo Sabres,
Yeah.
was acquired in 2006-2007, played 16 games for the Orange and Black that year, went on to start 59 games in 07-08, 53 games in 08-09 before moving on to the New York Islanders, and then finishing his career the final 4 years with the New York Rangers. Anthony, that was well done out of you.
Yeah, and I got a great Marty Biron story. So
Yes.
anytime you had to interview Marty Biron, he had more tape on his skates than any player maybe in history. I mean, when I tell you that he would sit there and the sound of the tape coming off his skate, you would listen to the interview. And sometimes you're interviewing other people, and all in the background of the tape recording, you would hear as the tape is coming off of his skate. And he would literally make these giant softball-sized balls of tape and then try and shoot it across the room into a trash can. And he was like lights out, man. Like the guy never missed. And he would go through an entire roll of tape every game, do that whole thing, that whole ritual of taking the tape off, and then it would be literally across the locker room, and he would sink it almost. I mean, he was 95%. It was unreal how good of a shot he was with that. And he was a great guy. It was a great interview too, even though he wasn't a great goalie. He was a great interview. Really good dude. One of Danny Briere's best friends, as a matter of fact.
If Marty Biron were still on this team, where would he rank? Let's go in his prime, Marty Biron. Where does he rank?
Well, in his prime, meaning when he was with Buffalo, when he was better than when he was with the Flyers.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't. To be honest with you, he wasn't terrible with the Flyers. He just was. I mean, I think the 07-08, right, that was his first full year with the Flyers, and they went to the conference final that year before losing to Pittsburgh.
Yep.
I think he had a decent season that year, if I recall. So and
I
then
didn't hate Marty. I thought he was fine.
he was fine. He was absolutely fine. But
Ooh, here we go. Heads up. You get to pick between one of these two guys.
Go ahead.
Who do you pick? Marty Biron or Robert Ashe?
I take Biron. He's a better goalie. I loved Ashe. Ashe was another great guy. Boy, he had some great stuff. He had some stories, and I can't even tell some of the stories that Robert Ashe used to tell.
Oh,
My God.
all right then.
We could tell. I could tell off air, but oh man, what a great storyteller he was. He's part owner of the Utica Comets. I think it's the
who now?
Comets. The Utica, New York. I think they're the Comets. Or maybe they're the Rockets. I think they're the Comets. Utica Comets.
There's something to do with interstellar travel. Got it.
Yeah, they're an AHL team, and he started that. He was one of the owners, and he petitioned to bring hockey to Utica, back to Utica. It used to be there years ago, or on a smaller minor league level. I think they were in the either the East Coast Hockey League or one of those defunct hockey leagues that existed for minor league hockey in the United States. And he decided that they would build it out there, and that's where he's from in New York. And he's still heavily involved with that team, and they've been a really big success in that market. So Eshy's a great guy, but if I had to pick between the two, I mean, Biron was a legit prospect. He was a first round pick by the Sabres. Like you had mentioned, he was a Calder finalist. I mean, his career numbers are, I think they're pretty decent. He played over 500 games. I know that much. I mean, I think he's the better of the two. And if he was on this team today in his prime, so I guess what, 0203 maybe. He's probably right behind. I mean, long term still behind Carter Hart, maybe ahead of Sandstrom. Probably two.
Behind Alex Lyon, of course, who was most recently interviewed on the Snow The Goalie podcast, the only Flyers podcast. That's good. All right.
Yeah. No, I loved Marty.
Marty Biron. There we go.
I really liked Marty. He was a good guy. Really good guy.
I like the fact that when I come up with the Who's That Flyer, about 2 minutes before I ask you, I unsolicitedly, in an unsolicited manner, I never ask you for, who are the names of the guys that you have the best stories about, and you somehow still always have a story about a guy. I'm going to try to find a really obscure Flyer from the last, let's go with 8 years.
So just so you know, I have stories about guys even before I was covering the team, but I've been covering the Flyers pretty exclusively since 2000. So any player in the last 18 years, I probably have something to say about them.
Some dirt on.
Yeah,
Got it.
I mean, it's not always dirt, but yeah, I probably have something.
Well, hey, if you don't have the dirt, Tim Panaccio could make it up, so that's exciting. I'm never gonna let it die. Never gonna.
You know what? Can I tell a Panaccio story
Right now?
Yeah, real quick.
Okay.
2010, the year that the Flyers are having this historic comeback against Boston. The series starts in Boston, Game 1. And the night before Game 1 of the series, all the writers are in town. So because it's the second round of the playoffs, the newspapers are sending columnists as well. So there's more than just your normal beat writers. There's at least 2 people from every paper. Some were sending 3 or 4, whatever. So Panaccio's there, and Sarah Baker had just started as someone who was doing some kind of writing for CSN Philly at the time. And so they decided to go to dinner at this Italian restaurant that Panaccio loved. And I ended up going, I went somewhere else with a couple other people. I didn't go to that restaurant. And then so the next morning we show up for the morning skate, Game 1, and Panaccio's all out of sorts. He's just like, he can't focus. He's like, I can't focus. I can't pay attention to what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what's going on, Panaccio? And he's like, the owner of this Italian restaurant we were in last night, he put the Maloiks on me. I said, what did he do? He said, he put the Maloiks on me. I said, what do you mean he put the Maloiks on you? He said, well, we were talking about the series, and he guaranteed that Boston was going to win, and we were saying the Flyers were going to win. And we were just having fun with him, and he then put the Italian curse on us and said that Boston was going to win the series, and somebody was going to get hurt in the series, blah blah blah. And so now he's like, I think that his Maloiks went on me and not on the Flyers. And I'm just standing there rolling my eyes, like, okay, how do you respond to this? Okay, this is a level of lunacy that you can't really do. So all I could do was appease him, right? It said, listen, go back to your hotel, lay down, don't go out to lunch, lay down, relax. Game 1's tonight, whatever. So he's all out of sorts. So that night we show up for Game 1. It's Game 1 of the second round of the playoffs. There are a ton of media there, right? We're jam-packed up there. And my seat is right next to Panaccio. And he's sitting there, and he's like, Anthony, who's that on the ice? I don't recognize that number. Anthony, who is that guy? And he's like freaking out. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? He's like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. So he walked I'm telling you, the first period has started of this game. He goes to the now up in Boston Stadium. It's like almost like a gondola up in the press level. So the GM boxes are up there with you. He goes into walks into Pete Chiarelli's box. This is the GM of the Boston Bruins. Okay, first period of a playoff game that he's the general manager for the team. Just bursts through the door. Pete, I need to see one of your doctors. There's something wrong with me. I need to see one of your doctors. So Chiarelli has him escorted downstairs. The doctors quickly look at him, and they send him to Mass General. He spends the entire night in Mass General. Now, poor Sarah Baker, who's never written a story for the website before, like a legitimate game story, is now thrust into this spot, and I feel so bad for her, right? And we're trying to help her out as best we can because now all of a sudden she's got to take over for him. He ends up in Mass General, and he comes out the next day, and we said, Panaccio, is everything okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, well, what happened? They diagnosed me with global transient amnesia.
What?
I said, what the hell's that? He says, yeah.
It sounds like something that Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker should be trying to fight back, like some kind of crime syndicate.
Global
Rush Hour 7.
Yeah, he said it's something that happens only once and it never happens again. He says it's the weirdest thing. He said, but I'm fine. And then he went back and covered the rest of the series, no issues. So they make the big comeback. They beat the Bruins, go on to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they lose. So now it's like a month and a half later that they lose to the Blackhawks. I'm just chilling late at night. I'm turning on TV, late night talk shows on, and Ken Jeong, who was on the talk show, and I believe it was Letterman, but it might have, I don't remember exactly. I think it was Letterman. And Ken Jeong is on. Of course, he's talking about one of the Hangover movies or something, and he talks about how he actually used to be in medicine, and he used to work in emergency rooms in California and the like. And so I'm pretty sure Letterman says to him, well, I'm sure you've seen some crazy people come into an ER in your hospital. And Ken Jeong goes, oh yeah, we used to get a lot of really crazy people who were insisting that they had something completely wrong with them, and they had nothing wrong with them. So Letterman asks him, says, well, Ken, how did you used to get rid of these people? Like, how, when you know that there's nothing wrong with them and they're sitting there in the ER? He goes, well, we would diagnose them with something ridiculous like global transient amnesia and then send them on their way.
No.
I lost it. I literally, in the middle of the night, it was like 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching this, whatever late night show it was. And I literally pulled out my phone and started texting people like, you won't believe what I just watched.
That's incredible. Oh
so global transient amnesia. Yes.
Poor Panaccio.
It's one of my all-time favorite stories from the beat. It really is. It was the most flabbergasting thing to be a witness to. Like, what is happening? What is going on? I really could not believe.
Global transient amnesia.
I just really couldn't believe he marched into Pete Chiarelli's box in the middle of the first period of a playoff game and told the guy he needs to see the Bruins.
Snyder probably would have picked him up by the back of the neck and thrown him down into the concourse, right?
Well, it'd be different if it was the owner's box, right? If you're going to the Bruins owner's box, that's a little bit different. Okay, fine. The owner's not The owner's interested, obviously, in the outcome of the game, but the owner's not hands-on with the team. He's walking into the general manager's box, the guy who's sitting there kind of, putting this team together for their playoff run. It was just fascinating. The whole thing was and it was something that was talked about in hockey circles for at least a year afterwards.
That's awesome. I thought the Buron thing was good. This man,
Yeah.
I think we might need an entire segment dedicated to stories of Panaccio.
Oh, I have plenty.
You got panached.
Maybe you should.
It's another panache in your belt.
Maybe you should title this episode "Global Transient Amnesia."
I want people to listen to the show, Anthony. Global Transient. Just imagine, that pops up in your podcast app. Global Transient. What? When I go to post this thing on Flyers fan pages, which I think has actually contributed to the ever increasing listener numbers that we have on this show.
Yeah.
I think a pretty straightforward thing, the episode was JVR was Plan B, or the Flyers off-season outlook. Those do well. Global Transient Amnesia. I don't know if that's a real go-getter. I think in the aftermath of it would be funny, but
you don't think it's attractive to people? Okay, fine.
Global Transient Amnesia. They're gonna be like, these guys. What is wrong with these people? No. I don't. I think that's about time to go. I think it's time to wrap it up. It is well past midnight here on the East Coast, and this has been another episode of Snow the Goalie. Of course, go check out the other shows in the Crossing Broad Podcast Network, including Crossing Broadcast, Cross Up Phillies podcast with Anthony and Bob. Go check them out. They released a new episode on Tuesday morning. It was very pleasant, very happy, all rainbows and smiles for the guys who like to talk about the game, where guys grab a large wooden bat and swing at a small ball, and the games take about 17 hours to finish. Also, go check out It's Always Soccer in Philadelphia with Kevin Kincaid. That typically goes out at least once or twice a week, usually one on the weekend, and as the Union are actually winning games, something the Phillies wouldn't know anything about, he's been releasing, I believe, one every so many weekdays, so that's kind of nice. Crossing Broad FC will be back this week with a recap so far of everything that's been going on in European soccer, and I think I got them all. And of course, Snow the Goalie. Don't forget to go on to iTunes, leave a 5-star review and rating, and we'll read it on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed the Alex Lyon interview, and let us know if there was anything that you took away from that interview that you found interesting. Hit us up on Twitter at AntSanPhilly and at JoyOnBroad. We'll always be happy to banter back and forth. And for Anthony, I'm Russ. We'll talk to you again very soon.